You're always working on playing better solos, improving your lines, finding the right scales and arpeggios, but actually jazz is about rhythm and you can better work on playing more interesting rhythms in your solos. Using triplets is a great way to improve your vocabulary, actually add a lot of bebop flavor, and it'll stop you from sounding like an eighth note robot with no dynamics and no expression. In this video, I'm going to go over 4 different ways that you can add triplets to your solo lines and make your solos a lot more interesting to listen to. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. Okay, let's get to it. The first place that you can use triplets is an example that's actually fairly easy to play because we can put it all on one string. Chromatic enclosures add tension and dissonance that's then resolved a few beats later when it hits the target note. And using an eighth note triplet really helps with that because that also adds some rhythmical tension and some more energy and momentum towards that target note. In this example, I'm using it in the beginning of the bar, resolving on beat 3 to the F, which is the third of the chord. And the line I'm using here is really common with bebop. This is something that you'll hear Joe Pass or Charlie Parker use very often. Notice that on the C major 7, I'm using a shorter version of the same concept. This double triplet chromatic phrase is one that's very common in Parker's playing. You can find it in his solo on Now's the Time or Anthropology. And it is a really nice way to just add a lot of chromaticism and a lot of energy in a short burst. And it's of course fairly easy to play. If you want to practice toward getting phrases like this into your playing, you can look at it as being a way to connect a minor third with half steps. So in this case, I'm moving up from E to G and then just filling in all the half steps. Now, if this is the resolution for a minor third, then I can also make one for a major third. So for instance, from C up to E, and then here I'm going to do first up a whole step and then chromaticism for the rest. And like this, you're creating an exercise that you can take into, for instance, an F major 7 arpeggio, like this. The next thing to check out is how you can create some great sounding arpeggio lines using triplets. Playing the G-7 arpeggio as a triplet with a leading note is something that is extremely common in all bop-inspired music, and it is something that you definitely want to have in your vocabulary. This way of using the arpeggio is really a way to sort of target the highest note in the arpeggio and give that a sort of an accent, because we have this fast run up to that note. And this is something that is really useful to check out and have in your playing. But there are other ways that you can use triplets and arpeggios as well, like this example, which is really inspired by Wes Montgomery. This way of playing the G-7 arpeggio as a triplet is a great way to really give some emphasis on the transition to the C7, where I'm sliding from the F down to the E. In this example, I'm also using a variation of the Honeysuckle Rose lick, but I'm turning it into a triplet phrase on the F major 7. A really great and actually fairly easy way to start practicing arpeggios so that you can play them like this is just to take the diatonic arpeggios and then play them like this through the scale. That would be this exercise. And of course, when you can play that exercise, you need to start working on using them in your own licks, but that's for another video. Let's look at how we can take some normal phrases and then turn them into some interesting triplet phrases. You could actually also play this example with more normal eighth notes. That would sound something like this. But you can hear how the first version sounds a lot more exciting and interesting. There's some rhythmical tension happening because the triplets are sort of going a little bit against the groove and adding some energy. And this is actually a very simple principle, because really what I'm doing here is that I'm just taking an eighth note line and then I'm transforming it, I'm mapping it onto a rhythm that has some triplets instead. And you can do this with any type of eighth note line. Another variation sounds like this. And again, I'm just creating a triplet rhythm so that I can take an eighth note line and then transform it using that rhythm. Let's look at how you can also use triplets for polyrhythms. Usually we feel triplets in groups of 3 notes like this. But you can also see the triplets as just splitting the bar into 12 equal parts. And of course you can group them in 3 notes, but you can also group them in 4 notes. That sounds like this. And this shifts really nicely on top of the meter, so it kind of creates some friction against the quarter note pulse. And that's just a really nice way to just change things up a little bit. Maybe kind of sound like you're in another tempo or in another meter on top of what is happening in the rhythm section. Here I'm using the 4-note groupings very clearly on the G7 altered, and the type of melody that I'm playing is of course just repeating, but because it's triplets it still works. If I was to play this with 8 notes it would probably sound a little bit lame and a little bit too predictable, but since it's sort of shifting on top of the meter, then it still works. And this is something you can really explore and do a lot with in your solos. People like Herbie Hancock are amazing at this. Another example that's a little bit more free sounds like this. The rhythm that I'm using here is a little bit different because I'm not playing all 4 notes in the 4-note grouping. I'm just playing 3 notes and then the last one is a little bit longer. That breaks it up and makes it a little bit more vague, but also a little bit more interesting. When it comes to practicing these triplet rhythms, and especially the transformations and the polyrhythms, then it makes a lot of sense to work on this also using some different grooves that are actually based in the triplets. Because if you're playing grooves where you just naturally have to play triplets all the time, then of course your triplet rhythms are just going to get a lot stronger. So checking out a lot of improvisation on Afro-Cuban 12/8 grooves and stuff like that is super useful, especially for learning how to play polyrhythms and the transformations, but certainly also all the other rhythms. It's just gonna free up your playing and make you more comfortable, and this is something you can take over to when you want to use it in swing grooves. Another sound that's really great with triplet melodies is pentatonic scale patterns. The two together form this really beautiful, strong, modern jazz sound. And if you want to explore how to work with this, then check out this video where I'm going over which different scales you can use on the different jazz chords, but also how you can use some pentatonic patterns to create some really strong jazz melodies that sound like John Coltrane more than they sound like B.B. King.